Well, hi again, and wondering how your readings are going for today. And as I was thinking about it, what got me today actually is the reverse of what I said last time and what I know Heather also referred to, in that it's kind of frustrating chronologically to go back and forth between the Gospels. For me, in our reading for today, actually, it was kind of nice to do that because Jesus begins his public ministry, and I'd have to say, he really begins it with a bang here. As we go back and forth between all the gospel writers, we notice all sorts of things happening, from healings to casting out of demons to preaching to gathering disciples. All of this seems to be coming about pretty quickly here. So I think it's kind of an exciting point in the narrative of Jesus' life and as it's told in the Gospels. And I wanted to pay particular attention to one word, which, and I don't know, maybe it won't hit you that way, but it hit me, and that's the word authority. And what do I mean by that? Well, let me go through with you where I saw places in our reading for today where Jesus displays or expresses his authority. First, in John chapter 4, verse 50, you remember the official who comes to him about his son being ill. Jesus says to him, "Go back home, your son will live." And the man goes back and certainly finds out that at the moment Jesus had said that, it turns out his son had been healed. Luke chapter 4, remember that whole account where he goes back to his hometown of Nazareth, which, by the way, is the only time we can see where he was ever at Nazareth. After that, we have no recounting of him ever going back there. But he's in the middle of it, and he's preaching to them. And you remember what he said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me." He's referring to Old Testament prophecies. He's saying, "For he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor and free the captives," and all of those things, in the hearing of these people in Nazareth, many of whom friends and relations. And they did not receive that well. But he's claiming that authority for that. And in the end, that authority gets played out, I think, in a unique way, because first he tells them, "This is me, I'm the one." And then, in verse 30 of chapter 4 there, they want to push him off the cliff. And it says he passed right through the crowd and went on his way. Again, displaying authority to be able to do that. And so we have that account. We also have in Mark 1 as well as Matthew chapter 4 where he's calling the disciples, where he calls Simon Peter and his brother Andrew. He says, "Come follow me and I will make you fishers of men." Mark 1, Luke 4, the demon, he says, "Be quiet, come out of that man." So he's literally exercising authority of the demons there. Mark 1, Matthew 8, and Luke 4, remember we're at Peter's mother-in-law's house, and she is sick, and we get this account where he touches her hand, and the fever leaves her. One account says he rebukes the fever. Simon's mother-in-law is healed. So in the midst of an illness, he rebukes the fever. He expresses authority over even illness. Mark 1 and Luke 4 talks about a lot of the preaching he did in the synagogues, and he did that very often. And then finally in Matthew chapter 4, it says, whatever their sickness or disease or demon possession, he healed them all. Again, authority over all of it. And so it's interesting that right off the bat, with a bang, Jesus is displaying and exercising his authority and saying, "I am he." And as Heather pointed out, that "I am" is the same one. Remember that when Moses asked God, "Well, who should I say sent me?" And God said, "Tell them I am." And that's literally the way Jews refer to God, to Yahweh, as "I am that I am." And in this case, Jesus using "I am" is basically telling them, God, I am the Messiah. And in fact, in one place in our reading today, he literally says, I think it's with the, is it the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman, literally says, "I am" in the Messiah. And that's probably about the only place he literally says that all out loud. But nonetheless, back to authority. Organizational theory speaks about how people gain authority. Number one, think of it in terms of a king. A king receives authority most often as inherited authority. In other words, he comes from a certain line, you automatically are given it. A president, as we undergo elections here soon, has delegated authority. In other words, the people elect him to be the authority and give him certain things that he's responsible for that he can do. We also have achieved authority. A professor in an institution of learning would have achieved authority. He's been given those credentials and that accreditation by some governing body and now is able to teach. In all these cases, though, the authority comes from outside that person. In Jesus' case, we have something very different, and this would be inherent authority. In other words, it comes from nowhere else but from him himself. He didn't claim any degrees. He did not come from a line of kings, so to speak, though we know he came from a line that God had chosen. But he also has nobody's voting for Jesus. Jesus comes and claims, I am. And so he has inherent authority. And I think in many cases, because he was able to display that authority without giving people a lot of those credentials that they would have expected to see, they were amazed. We're told they were astonished by all the things that he did. So that leads me back to, what are his credentials to have this authority? Because we said he didn't come with a degree. He didn't have a father who was a king. He was born in a manger in Bethlehem. He did not win an election. So where are his credentials? Well, it's interesting because if you think about it, number one, he was announced by man, certainly implied by prophets in the Old Testament, and he refers to those prophecies, and he as the fulfillment. Also, though, he was announced by John the Baptist, who talked about one is coming who is greater than me. He must increase so that I must decrease. So John announced him. He was affirmed by God. Remember, at his baptism, it was the dove ascending and God saying, this is my son in whom I am well pleased. And thirdly, he was even acknowledged by demons over and over again as they screamed, we know who you are. What do you have to do with us? And so his credentials come in a different way. But nonetheless, he has them. And so with all these credentials and with this authority, what is it he is doing? Why is he coming? What he tells them is, I have come to bring good news. And the good news is, I have seen your sin, I have seen your plight. I am going to obey my Father in heaven, and we are providing forgiveness and life eternal to you. There is redemption and there is freedom. There is hope, there is joy, there is love, and there is mercy for all mankind. That's what he's coming to do, and he has the credentials and the authority to carry out the plan. Now, one interesting thing. So the reference in the Greek here, this word authority as used here is exousia, E-X-O-U-S-I-A. It's used in all of the Gospels, though there are other references to authority. There's a little different flavor to them. Here, the word actually means privilege. And God gives Jesus a great privilege here to exercise authority. Now, what I've come to at the end of this is that we also know that as Jesus ascended into heaven and sends his Spirit to his people, to the church, we as temples, the dwelling place of his Holy Spirit in our hearts and minds, God gives us the authority to forgive and retain sins. That's what he gives to his church on earth. Now, that means we likewise have this privilege. Jesus exercised it perfectly. How am I doing? And that's my challenge for me today and for you. How are we doing it, exercising the authority, the privilege God gives us in our lives? Or are we exercising it at all? Or are we just keeping it hidden? I'm going to pray about that today and assess in some ways, where am I using the authority God gives me effectively? Where am I not? Because with privilege, man's sin nature, we always have to be on guard that we don't abuse that. And so we trust in pastors and other leaders to guide us and lead us as we read the Scriptures and watch Jesus, our example, exercise that authority. So not only is it Jesus here exercising that authority, but what I would bring to you today is that He's given us this authority to act and to will according to His plan and in His way in the lives around us. And so I pray that His Holy Spirit gives us all strength today to do just that in wherever and whatever we're doing. And we'll look forward to talking with you again.